Hi, I am Elizabeth Jensen, and today I'm going to be presenting about English learners in Arizona. This is for Grand Canyon University for ESL 546. Today we are talking about English learners in Arizona, and our first question is, what is an English learner? According to Arizona's HB 2313, they state that an English learner or limited English proficient student means a child who does not speak English or whose native language is not English and who is not currently able to perform ordinary classroom work in English. So there is a distinction in it's not a student who can just speak one or more languages. It is a student who is not proficient in English enough that it affects their education and affects their learning. So they may be bilingual or speak other languages, but if they can speak English proficiently enough to do well in class and to understand what's being taught, they are not considered an English learner. When we look at the demographics of Arizona's English language population, it leans heavily at 75% of those who speak Spanish at home. They're Hispanic and Latino students. However, there's also diversity, including Native Americans who speak Navajo, Asian students with languages like Vietnamese, and African students who would be speaking Somali, making still a diversity of ethnic backgrounds that are coming into our classrooms and that we may interact with. When an English learner is identified in the state of Arizona, they are then enrolled in what's called a structured English immersion. This is a program that is designed to help quickly teach English to students who do not understand and speak English well enough. It focuses specifically on teaching the skills like grammar, the pronunciation, vocabulary, and kind of the actual structure of the English language. Um, it also is important that we understand that it doesn't actually use um, the student's previous native language. They aren't using it as comparison or back and forth. It just focuses on this is what English is, this is how we say it, this is how we use it, these are what the words mean. When we look at the difference between the SEI or sheltered English instruction, which is a different kind of program of teaching English. Sheltered English focuses more on the academic content and using English in an academic setting and understanding what those academic skills are while acquiring the English language. While structured English is focusing very much on just how to speak English, um, what those rules are, how we say it, and less to do with the actual academic content. It also differs in how they group students together to teach the language. In structured English immersion, they're grouped together, and it doesn't really matter if they're fairly proficient or brand new. They all can be taught the same rules and the same process at the same time. When we look at sheltered English instruction, they group them together based on grades or what they're learning, because of course this is focusing more on the academic content and what you would be teaching a fifth grader versus a kindergarten is a very different academic content. And so the groups that you are making to teach are going to look very different. While looking at the different formats and how we want our English learners to maybe specifically learn English may be involved in our structured English immersion program. Arizona also has their language development approach, and this has to do with the students being in our general education classrooms and how we're going to approach those students, both with behaviors and their learning, and how we're going to help them be successful in a general education classroom. Arizona has 4 main approaches, and all of them are emphasized student agency and helping that student build confidence and being able to be successful in a general education classroom. The first principle is asset-based behaviors and expectations. So looking at a student, they have a culture, they have a home language, they have a community and knowledge that they bring to the classroom. And it is our responsibility as a teacher to be able to look for those assets, to be able to find those ways in that we're building community and understanding culture, and to help that student feel that what they bring to the classroom is important and it's of value. And so when it states about asset-based behaviors, it's also basing those on understanding that we want to understand where the student is coming from and recognize as we bring that into a classroom that they may have a different cultural understanding of how things happen or occur, and we're going to help bring that to our classroom and meet their needs and what is going to be beneficial for them. The second principle is integrated instruction in disciplinary language and content. So this is talking about how the language we use and making it accessible for our student. It's helping them learn not only in those classroom rules and expectations, but also in how we scaffold what we're teaching them using a language that is possibly more accessible to them and building discussions that they are able to be a part of and still feel like they can contribute to the classroom. Finding ways to build that self-confidence, to give them choices, to provide a variety of strategies that could be supportive to them and let them choose maybe what's the best way for them to answer that question or the best way for their needs to be met. When we look at the third principle, it is targeted and explicit language instruction. So we're creating opportunities for students to use language in all sorts of situations and being able to not only read and write, to speak in their listening skills and being able to make connections with what they're learning. We want to be able to help students have a rich and immersive language environment that helps them understand and think and understand the content and being able to provide appropriate instruction and materials, but that also culturally and linguistically are appropriately are appropriate for them, that helps them be able to make connections with what they already know and they can connect to what we are teaching them. Um, we want them to be able to encourage them to learn in a multifaceted and in different environments, and help them be able to use it and generalize their language in every situation. Our last principle is assessment monitoring and feedback. So how are we going to do those formal assessments or check-ins to see if that student is understanding instruction, to understand where we may be able to need to support them, where they're not understanding. And so it's being able to find ways to make those formative and summative assessments as we pre-teach information, as we check throughout lessons, as we have those formal assessments at the end of our lessons, and kind of being able to do constant check-ins with our students to see if they are understanding what content is being taught. If we're talking about plants and stems, do they know what a stem means? Do they know what it is? Are we able to help them understand that terminology? And is it then making connections to what they understand? And so it's important, especially as teachers, to understand that ongoing um, feedback that we constantly have to have with our students, and especially in the case of English language learners, of if they are understanding um, what they are being taught. And so throughout all of this is kind of an overarching theme of helping students find confidence, in helping them have opportunities to learn and understand content, as well as being able to express themselves. And so Arizona's concept of language development is truly to help them be successful. Last slide, we talked about how all of those principles were kind of based on student agency. So what exactly is our student agency? What is it based off of? When we look at understanding student agency, it's referencing a student's ability to be able to take ownership of their learning, to be able to make goals, to set goals, to follow through on goals, to really actively participate in what they're learning and what they want to learn. Because if a student doesn't have the desire to learn or have the willingness, we can present them with as much information as we want, but it's really not going to go anywhere if they don't want to have that education, or if they don't want to learn English. So some of those aspects of student agency, self-determination, when they get to choose how they want to learn, when they are able to identify maybe what they're not so good at and what they're good at, and be able to have a choice in where they want to go and what they want when it comes to language. What do they want their language to look at? How do they want to be able to communicate? Is that important to them? The next one is our sense of voice. So it's not just that they can learn to speak English and that they can maybe do so clearly or effectively, but it's the fact that they can have a voice in their language, that they can share their experiences, that they're able to participate and make connections with other people around them, and they have a language and a form of communication that they can do that, that they can feel heard and not just be able to maybe raise their hand and give the correct answer, but that they are able to share themselves and be able to express what they want people to hear around them, and to have those language skills in a way that they feel confident expressing themselves, which builds exactly into our last one, which is confidence itself. When students are able to participate and see that they're contributing to class, that they are of value, that the things that they say are being heard and recognized in the classroom, and that they are part of that connection, they are able to build confidence in their language skills and take some of those risks, and to maybe share an answer that maybe they wouldn't before, because they feel like they do have the language skills, or maybe they feel like they don't quite know how to express themselves, but they're willing to try because they feel like their answer will be valued. And so it's really important, as these students are in our classrooms, to be able to give them opportunities to share, but to also recognize their effort and what they're wanting to say, because if they don't feel like they can say something and have some feedback, or feel like what they say is of value, then they stop sharing and they stop wanting to be a part of that community. And so being able to find opportunities that we can offer student choices or options, and maybe how they present or how they share their information, they might be more willing to draw a picture and hang it up, or they might be willing to stand up and talk about something, but they have a choice on how maybe they interact in some of those situations. Putting them with another peer who can possibly provide some of those fill-ins of those language gaps that they need, and support each other with ideas. Giving a student an opportunity to look back and see how they've progressed, where they started at the beginning of the year, where they've been able to go, how much they've grown in different areas of learning, or even in just communication, and really taking that time to sit down with that student and help them see their growth and progress, to know that they are making progress and they can continue doing so. And a lot of that comes back with our positive feedback, how we're speaking to them, how we're celebrating them, how we're helping them feel that they are being successful in the classroom, even though it may be a struggle and there may be language and communication barriers that are being overcome, but that they know that they're welcome and that they are part of that environment. We've talked a lot about incorporating these students into our classrooms, the involvement and bringing them in. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how they qualify, how we find them eligible to be an EL student and provide the extra support services that they need. So the first step is filling out a whole language survey. It's asking, about the primary language, identifying, what they may be speaking, if they are bilingual and, they already know English proficiently. Do they speak both English and Spanish at home? Is the home primarily Spanish? Is it another language? And so filling out that survey is the first step to then being able to move on to the Arizona English Learning Assessment, the AZELA, and that really is what's going to give the determination about a student's placement, about what level of English learner they are, if they know no English at all, if they know a little bit, if they're able to communicate efficiently with people around them, are they able to understand it but they can't write it. All the different aspects of learning and using it in communication and using it in curriculum, and how well versed in English is that student, and how is it affecting their education. And so after they take the Azella, they're then um, placed into, determine what level of support is going to be appropriate for them. And then there is consistent reassessments to continue to determine when, where they are, how they're progressing, if once they've reached the point that they're sufficient in English and they can exit the program. Um, and so using this assessment is really the basis of understanding of where they are, the supports that they need, if they're growing, if they're progressing, if they're not progressing, and what we can do for that student. When talking about taking the Azella, there are a variety of accommodations that can be offered to the student while they are taking that test, to help them be more successful. Some of those accommodations may include, you know, seating. Can they sit in a more comfortable location that's, maybe less distracting where they're taking it? If there's somewhere that's going to be quieter, or if there's somewhere that, maybe a classroom that they feel more comfortable in. The testing location itself, that they can take it in a small group if they need to take it by themselves, if they need to go somewhere completely separate, that they can, be alone with no distractions. Any of those things can kind of help, a student just be more successful. Maybe some might be more comfortable taking it with other students, and some may not want anyone else around while they take that test. The test administrator can also, you know, be someone who maybe they're more familiar with, um, so that they feel comfortable with that person. How the test is presented itself. Um, the administrator can, explain, they can simplify the instructions, trying to make them so that that student understands what they're supposed to be answering. It's not just strictly that it's in front of them and then hopefully they know what to do. The administrator can help explain those things and repeat them. The test can be read out loud for a student, except for obviously the reading section, because that is gauging if they can read and how well they understand, reading English. However, the other sections can be read out loud so that they can truly get a best understanding of what the student does and does not know. The test time, the students can take the time that they need. If they need to take breaks during the test, they can have kind of those breaks, extra time to complete and to have things explained to them. It can be taken over, multiple days if they need it broken up into smaller sections. Um, the students even allowed, other accommodations regarding, pencils, and using a pencil that may be more comfortable for them. If they need a magnifying glass or something to better read the test, if, they have hearing aids, or if they even need to wear headphones to help kind of minimize the noise during reading sections. There's a lot of accommodations, even just using larger print or other formats, so that it's as accessible as possible to all students, and they can be, truly get a best understanding of what the student knows. Once a student has taken the Azella, they've determined, what level of support the student needs or where they are in their, language acquisition. Then it's determined what kind of model that student and support that student is given in school. So initially, if a student really doesn't know any English, doesn't know how to communicate, is possibly new to the United States, it's called the newcomer model. This is 4 hours a day. So it is a majority of the students school day. And it's intensive, English instruction. It's focusing on skills like vocabulary and grammar, basic communication. It's also teaching about cultural and orientation to help a student adapt to the United States. And so they not only are learning English, but cultural aspects of living here. They're focusing highly on initial literacy and reading skills. And so when a first student, who needs a lot of English support would be in that newcomer model. As a student is more proficient, they may move to a 2-hour model. And so it's half that time. It's your dedicated kind of 2-hour block of English instruction, again, kind of focusing on vocabulary, grammar, enunciation. However, that student is still integrating with their general education classroom the remainder of the day to get, your academics and your content outside of that 2-hour kind of English learning time. We would then move to a pull-out model where they are in their general education classroom the majority of the day, and they're pulled out for 1 hour, and they're usually in small groups um, for a time from their regular education classroom. They're again focusing on those English skills, those vocabulary, those grammars, but also speaking, reading, writing, kind of getting some of those other aspects that they're going to need to have in their classroom. The last one is an option for a 50-50, so it's the dual language immersion. And this is equal instruction in both English and their partner language, which the majority of the time would be Spanish. And it's actually focusing on that student becoming bilingual and by being able to read in both languages as well. And so it's not just about English and English grammar, but half the day is focusing on those skills in English, and half of those days are focusing those skills in Spanish. And so they can read and write and understand curriculum in both languages. In order for a student to be put into that 50-50 immersion, it is required that they have a parental consent. So it's not just like the other models where they may take that test and then they'll say, hey, this is where we want to place them. It does take an extra step of parents deciding and agreeing that they want them to be bilingual, and in schools that even offer that as an option, because not every school will have the opportunity to provide that 50-50 dual immersion. Last aspect we're going to talk about is just the rights of the parent in these situations. And so, they have a student in the school, the student is being tested for language skills. They come back and recommend, whether they're in a newcomer model or whether they want them in a 2-hour, or these different recommendations. And a parent does have the right to refuse enrollment in an English language program, or to remove them at any time. So if that parent does not want them, being pulled out of the class, receiving those English training, they have the right to not have them in those services. They can also refuse, even initially, for their child to be assessed for English language proficiency, even either at the beginning or even once they're in the program, and there's continued reassessments, that the parent can decide not to have their student participate in those. The parents have a right to any of their information regarding the student, to their scores, to progress monitoring, what the student is having access to or being taught, that they understand that and have access to that at any point and can request those scores or information. The parents have a right to, receive guidance in a language that they can understand. So even though their student may be being taught English, that when they are being explained what the test is, when they're, being told that their student will be participating in these different classes, that there is an interpreter or someone who can explain to the parents that the parent has a full understanding in what's happening and the choices available for their student. And so that the parent also can make decisions and know what is happening with their student. And so it's important that we understand that it's not just the teaching of English to the students, but also providing understandable language for the parents so they can make the decisions that they need to and have all the information in a language that they can understand in making those choices for their students. Um, all of these are aspects of, you know, the language program in Arizona. And when we look at the process of, you know, getting the students into classrooms, of teaching them the language skills, of how we're teaching them the language skills, when we're trying to make sure that they have the supports in their classroom, that they can, build confidence, that they can participate, that they can feel like they are growing and learning and want to then, find and make that purpose and to put forth their own effort to learn English, to be a part of our communities. It's important that we provide those supports so that they can be successful in our schools, so that they can be a part of our communities, so that they can feel welcome, so that they can grow as individuals and feel of value. Um, Thank you very much.